Afternoon, how you doing? I do have some information that I'd like to hand out, but because of the size of this audience behind us and people testifying, we're not going to go through that. That you might want to look through a little bit later. Part of the thing that I wanted to talk about today was this definition of maintenance, and I am and was a construction worker. So I wanted to make sure that everyone understands that maintenance work is easily as technical as new construction. So differentiating the wages from new construction versus maintenance work doesn't make any sense. My particular field was the coatings application industry. I worked in the field for many years, and then I became the director of training for the Painters District Council. And a lot of the work you're speaking about, the maintenance work, is coatings application. Much of Missouri's infrastructure, bridges, tanks, water towers, dams and locks, things like that, overpasses across the state must be maintained, as we know from the news reports about our aging infrastructure, must be maintained, or eventually we're going to have to pay to replace those. So the coatings application is a huge industry, and it's maintenance. What you must understand is that it's not just a matter of getting up there with a 4-inch brush on a tank. That is highly technical, and some of this training is actually much more intense than those of new construction. For example, DOT work, which is quite a bit of this maintenance work. Before that project can even be let, the contractor, this is maintenance now, it's not just new construction, the contractor must submit to DOT a plan of how they're going to inspect the quality of that particular project. An engineered drawing must be made of how they're going to contain all the dust from the surface preparation, mainly abrasive blast. They must be a Missouri-approved contractor, and these projects go very high price. Before that project can start, before those workers can take place, they must have intense training. Remember, ladies and gentlemen, that a lot of this work occurs several hundred feet above the ground, that this occurs over water, that it occurs in spaces that when you pull the trigger on a spray gun may become flammable, explosive, and meet the definition of a confined space, a dangerous definition. So before the workers can even take place on the job, the contractor and the workers themselves must assure that they have the safety training for scaffolding. They must have the safety training for confined space, for respiratory protection from all these hazards. There are issues like histoplasmosis, lung infection from dealing with the pigeon droppings on bridges, tanks, and water towers. The chemicals that they're spraying are extremely dangerous. In the old days, in many of your districts, you will recognize old bridges and even fairly new bridges that have aluminum paint on them. That was the old system. Red lead primer, aluminum paint over the top. And as all of you know from being legislators, lead-based paint was banned many years ago because it's very dangerous. And exposure to the citizens of Missouri, the workers of Missouri, and our environment to lead is a key issue in these maintenance projects. So any bridge, tank, or water tower that's going to be maintained must be contained, must have, and you've probably seen driving down the highway many times, a piece of a bridge is wrapped in tarps. Well, these are not just wrapped in tarps, they must be fully sealed seams. They must have negative pressure filtered vacuum on them to take all the lead dust produced from this taking off of the coatings in the filters and not in the environment. Matter of fact, the EPA regulation, which is policed by our own Missouri DNR, is 0.15 millionths of a gram averaged over a 90-day period. These workers must take that engineered containment with the raised seal and produce that containment so tight and filtered so well that they produce less than 1/10 of 1 billionth of a gram into the atmosphere. While that containment is going up, they usually go up on cables. They usually climb the steel, attach cables, and fall protection at all times. Must be trained in that, how to use the harness, how to use the lanyard, attach cables, and then they're hanging, putting up this containment, abrasive blasting, spraying materials, whatever needs to be done, up in the air, 150, 200 feet, from a lousy cable. That takes a lot of training, it takes a lot of skill. So I don't want you to misinterpret the term maintenance. These are very highly skilled individuals that do this work. It is also assured, because even though these individuals must be trained so that when they use abrasive blast, they have a range of several thousandths of an inch that they must etch into the steel, and no more or no less. So if you do a bridge band and it's too much, what are you going to do? You've already eaten into it too much. If it's not enough, you must go back and re-blast it. Well, how do we confirm that? Private work and DOT has their own inspectors, and they have hold points. So once this is contained and rigged, and these platforms are up there, and they've been trained about how to work over water and how to stay away from lung infections and how to put on their respirator and how to check their respirator, so on and so forth, they have an individual come behind them and they test each section of blast and get the go-ahead to go ahead and put the primer on. But we're not done yet, because on all these irregular shapes, on bridges, tanks, water towers, dams, so on and so forth, the coating thickness must be in a range of several thousandths of an inch on this entire surface, and it's inspected by an inspector before the next one can go on. So my intention here was, before this debate continues, was for you to understand this is not maintenance work like we're going to repaint a room or something like that. This is highly technical stuff, and the prevailing wage reflects the fact that this takes this amount of training. Questions?
Thank you, sir, for a very informative testimony. Are there other